If you have been living under a rock and somehow missed the chassis-blasting, explosion-making, beam sword-wielding, giant robot piloting sensation that's bouncing around the gaming community, then boy howdy do we have a lot to talk about! Oh yeah, make sure to, subscribe and all that jazz. I hear it's doing well for making channel growth happen and stuff. But onward to giant robots! Look, Armored Core 6 is made by the company most well known for turning gamers into masochists. So right out the gate, let's weed out the weak and have an adult conversation here. If you like Souls-like games, the iconic games like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, and Darksiders 3... I couldn't even say that last one with a straight face. If you like these kind of games, you are more than likely going to enjoy Armored Core 6 all around. It's a fun and fast-paced game with punishing bosses, many weapons, and builds that make missions feel completely different, depending on how you want to approach it. But for those of you who hate the spirit that is the Souls series, mostly the crushing odds and the occasional bout of deep depression and loss of motivation no stronger than living in the modern-day American economic crisis, then you might want to avoid Armored Core 6 completely. First, let's make this crystal clear. I love the giant robot trope, with shows like Gurren Lagann, Gundam, and Darling in the Franxx taking up my streaming service's recommended pages. I have a little bit of a bias. And since picking up the game for the first time on stream, I've had a blast with it. Sure, I haven't beaten it yet, but that's only because I want to set aside time to power out a video and share my feelings with you all. And this has nothing to do with getting absolutely clapped back to back by a stupid spaceman with like 50 fucking drones everywhere and way too much health and way too fast. Nothing to do with that. Armored Core 6 is a great first impression with its swift and smooth delivery of that customization system, as you have nearly no downside for equipment costs. You just buy and sell items you own for the exact same price each way. Building off of that customization, your mech building and stat personalizations feel so much more free and far less punishing to try and do new and exciting things. Which is a step in an odd direction for many Souls games, as other Souls games are making you grab things like Pale Tongues and Larval Tears just to respec and get a different feel for the game. But Armored Core 6 doesn't do that whatsoever. You can just do anything you want and buy anything you need for a future mission by the end of Chapter 1, and sell anything you're not using to close the price of expensive gear even if you do fall short. You can do nearly anything for any mission. And although the problem of power balance is always going to be there, you can still play with any build for any mission, as long as you're masochistic enough to try. I would say this argument, though, isn't really that different from any other Souls game, where some weapons, combinations, attacks, and otherwise builds are just fundamentally better than one another. And figuring them out, or just looking them up, is half the fun of playing a Souls game anyways. It's the adventure of challenge, trial and error, learning, and finally, if ever, conquering. But I'm not infallible, and I clearly have a soft spot for sick giant robots blowing up other robots. I mean, come on, when you're at Mach 3 dodging missiles, and all the while your cockpit is screaming warnings from every direction, trying to save you from fire, bullets, and swords, daring to tear you away from your armored shell and show you the mortality that you shield yourself from with steel and life support systems. All these dangers and experience bring you to the time of reckoning when the boss finally shows up, and everything is on the line. Every movement and burst of energy is like a dance, and you debate on why you're here in the first place, and how you could possibly overcome this impossible challenge. And suddenly, you earn the upper hand, and everything sinks together. The attacks seem slower, easier to see. The fire and brimstone the boss usually fires forth looks paltry to the damage you're consistently chipping in. And finally, the health burns and grinds down to a sliver, and it's a battle to the last pixel of health and the final casing of ammunition. And when you break the limits and confirm that sweet victory, and all you want to do is scream in primalistic satisfaction that you finally, oh so finally beat it, you find out that was just phase 1. The thrill of the mecha genre is so fun to me personally, and I'm sure maybe I'm overselling that feeling, but like I said, it's a small bias. but I see its greatest shortcoming as part of the same feeling of ecstasy. Some bosses or secret enemies can really get your blood pumping, the moments that have your heart dancing to and fro as you fight to the bitter end with a kill or be killed inevitability. Those are the moments you really enjoy and remember. But for every one of those moments, there's about 20 moments of more relatively bland gameplay. There are scenes and missions that feel empty, barren even, or otherwise pointless. Even when taking into account that you need some downtime in between good missions to make the biggest boss fights feel more impactful, these missions just don't do it for me. I wish there was more to these missions and enemies. And maybe I'm missing some parts, or maybe I haven't gotten New Game Plus where extra enemies show up or enemies are tougher, but really it just sort of seems disappointing my first playthrough. This isn't to say that every enemy is boring, though, or every event can't have its own thrill or secret that keeps you coming back for more. But it's just so often I see myself fighting similar copy-pasted enemies that all die in one hit or fail to pose any sort of challenge or difficulty. It feels like a boss rush many times, where the occasional meat shield just jumps in the way to get down, Mr. President, before you actually get to the boss. Lastly, and by far the biggest offense in this entire game, has been the fact that I can't name my own call sign. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Raven? Like the bird? I want nothing to do with birds. I want to be a turtle or some other animal. Like, God, how hard is it to give me, like, a list to pick from for the audio? Like, I mean, that's not even the biggest problem. Like, look, a cool reference to older games is nice. You make me name my pilot, and you don't even call me my pilot name. You just name me, like, 7 different names. You call me, like, Dog, and 626, and Gunslinger, and, like, and Invader, or whatever the fuck you're calling me that mission. Like, seriously, what's the point of my name, then? You give me a new nickname every mission, and nobody bothers to ask me my real name or opinion on the matter. My overall opinion of Armored Core 6 so far is it's a must-buy for Souls fans. It's a fresh take. I love the movement emphasis and the customizations, and obviously, I'm a major sucker for giant robots, and its lows really boil down to the lack of detail when put under scrutiny. It reminds me of a nostalgic game you played as a kid, one you remember putting hours into, only to pick it up 10 years later with a new re-release, and it just doesn't feel right. It's still memorable, and it's quite good. And sure, it's shiny and new, but it's not quite everything you were hoping for. Honestly, Armored Core 6 is a solid 7.6 for me. But I know many other people who might have not the same interest of giant robots that I do, and would more likely vote this closer to a 6.5 or a 7, or even others who would vote this a 5 or a 4. And I don't really blame them at all. In fact, I think that's really reasonable. For everything that I've been hearing, and how I've been playing the game, I personally can't contain my excitement for the game. And it's really doing the thing that it came to do. It promises hard fights and giant robots. And damn does it deliver with vigor and passion. FromSoft may be the sadist of game developers, but they do know how to deliver a game with a bunch of care and lore to make anyone suffer through New Game Plus Plus just to grab that true ending. In conclusion, I'm going to go back to playing giant robot games, and throwing myself at these bosses over and over until I get sick of it and want to throw my controller. And to everyone else, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And remember to like and subscribe and all that jazz, and go check out my live Twitch, and check out D&D Abridged and all that, and all the cool other stuff that I'm doing, and yeah.